Assalamualaikum and greetings. Today we are going to present on Sta108 and we are from SEM 3 RAS 125 3D. Today we are going to present about our statistical findings on the relationship between hours of sleeps and also the GPA of students. So before we begin our presentation, I'm going to introduce some of the members involved in this presentation. So for the first one, me, Nun. The second one, Akila. The third one, Putri. And the fourth one, Shu. And the final one is Humaira.
Hello everyone. Now, I will talk a little bit the introduction about our topic. So the first point is background of study. This study is done to analyze the relationship between one's sleeping hours against their grade point average (GPA). 35 students of different years in college from both gender participated in this study. The data for this study is taken from statecrunch.com. Therefore, it is a secondary data set. The location of the study taken was not mentioned in the sources. Next, objective of study. The objective of study are as below. The first one is to investigate the relationship between the number of hours students sleep and their grade point average (GPA). The second one is to determine the extent which sleep duration influences academic performance among students. Significance of study. Getting a good amount of sleep for everyone is very important to ensure that our brain engages so that work or anything that we did can be done efficiently and properly. However, the amount of sleep needed by an individual might differ according to the age. According to the research that was done, teenagers starting age 13 to 18 need around 8 to 10 hours of sleep every night. Meanwhile, adults need to sleep for several hours or more at night. The study will show that how the total hours of sleep by a college student every day can affect their GPA. Besides, gender is also included in the study as different gender might have different level of IQs and intelligence. Next, age is also considered in the study as some of the students might have their own personal commitment or a part-time which might affect their GPA. Furthermore, year in college of a student can be the reason why there are a various pattern of GPA from the result obtained. In general, the study will show how GPA of students in the college can be affected by the gender, different age, year in college, and the total hours of sleep of the student every day. And the last point from my part is the limitation of study. The limitation of study is the methodology that influences the interpretation of the finding from the research. The limitation of the study is the nature of the data acquisitions. This data was obtained on an online website called StateCrunch. So it is a secondary data. This data does not include more background information when the data was collected. So we assume that the data was collected through an interview which included some of students that got interviewed by their gender, age, year in college, and hours of sleep recorded and how it affects their GPA. That's all from me. Now I will pass it to my friend.
Now I am going to talk about the methodology of this study. So, in this study, we figured that genders and years in college are the qualitative variables, while the age, the hours of sleep, and GPA are the quantitative variables. So, from this study, the population of the study is all students in the college, while the sample is 35 students, consists of both female and male students. So the sampling technique that was used is simple random sampling, and the sample was chosen randomly from the sampling frame of the students list that volunteers. And the data collection method was direct observation from the interview, and as we can see from the table provided, there are the variables in the studies that consist of genders, age, years in college, hours of sleep, and GPA. Okay, so now I am going to explain about the graphical description. So, a pie chart was constructed based on the table distribution of students according to their hours of sleep. So, the pie chart will show the percentage of students in each sleep category. So, a table will be then tabulated based on the hours of sleep and the number of students. Then a histogram will be constructed to illustrate the distribution of hours of sleep. Okay, next, a table with the data of the GPA range of the students in each range will then be tabulated, and then a histogram will be constructed to represent the distribution of GPA among the students. GPA range will be placed on the y-axis, while the number of students will be represented on the x-axis. Next, a box and whisker plot will be used for analyzing the skewness of the students' GPA based on their sleep categories and the skewness of the sleep hours based on their GPA range. And lastly, a scatter plot diagram will be constructed based on the sleep hours and the GPA. So, the GPA will be represented on the y-axis, meanwhile the sleep hours will be represented on the x-axis. Okay, so now I am going to explain about the numerical technique. So in this study, we included the statistical measures such as mean, median, mode, variance, standard deviation, range, maximum and minimum values, the skewness, first and third quartile to analyze the relationship between hours of sleep and the student's GPA. Okay, so and lastly, the simple linear regression equation that was used is y equal to a plus bx, whereas x is the independent variable, y is the dependent variable, a is the y-intercept, and b is the slope of the line.
Thank you, Putri. So moving on to the next chapter, Chapter 3, Result Interpretation. For data presentation, I'm going to present on the qualitative variables, which is the first one is the gender. As you can see on the table, there are male and female for gender category. Male consists of 14 number of students, whereas female consists of 21 number of students. The percentages of male is 40%, where percentages of female is 60%. And based off this table of data, a pie chart has been constructed and it represents the percentages of male and females respectively. Moving on to the next variable, which is also qualitative variable, but it's a bit different this time. The previous one is nominal qualitative, this one is ordinal qualitative, and it is years in college of the students. Well, as you can see on the table of data, years in college of the students are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. And they have their respective number of students that sum up to 35 and percentages that sum up to 100. Based on the data, a pie chart has been constructed and it represents each of the respective percentages.
For the quantitative variable, firstly we have grade point average GPA. Based on the data distribution with the sample size of 35 students, a histogram can be constructed. From the histogram, we can observe that the graph is skewed to the left. This shows that the students who participate in this study have a good result of GPA. The highest result of GPA of the student is 4.00 with only one student, and the lowest result of GPA is 2.50 with also one student only. Also from the graph, we can identify the mode, which is 3.3776. Furthermore, based on the data for this variable, we can calculate the Q1, Q2, and Q3 to construct the box and whiskers plot. The overall skewness of GPA of the student is negative 0.358. This means the overall distribution of this variable is less skewed since the value of the skewness is negative. From the box and whisker plot, we could see that GPA are skewed to the left, which is negatively skewed. The plot shows that the Q2, which is the median line, is located more toward the right. Net is hour of sleep of the 35 students. Based on the data distribution, as you can see, a histogram can be constructed. From the histogram, we can observe that the graph squareness is approximately symmetrical. The highest quantity of sleep recorded by the student from the study is 9 hours per night by 2 students, and the lowest quantity of sleep recorded from the study is 4 hours per night by only 1 student. As we can conclude from the histogram, most of the students sleep for 6 hours as it is recorded to possess the highest frequency, which is 13 out of 35 students. Furthermore, based on the data for this variable, we can evaluate the Q1, Q2, and Q3 to construct box and whisker plot. The squareness of the sleep hour of the student is 0.188. This shows that the squareness of the distribution is right squared as the value of the squareness is positive. From the box and whisker plot, we also can observe that the hours of sleep by the students are squared to the right or positively squared. From this plotting, we can see that the median, which is Q2, location is more toward the left. Thus, this makes the whisker plot much longer on the right side compared to the left side of the whisker.
Thank you, Akila. So I'm going to go further on descriptive statistic for GPA of the students. The mean X-bar value for this variable is 3.38. This means that on the average, the GPA of the students is 3.38. Up next, the median, which is the X-wave, can be interpreted that 50% of the students got less than 3.5, while the other 50% got more than 3.5 pointer for GPA. Now, as for the mode, we can interpret that most of the students managed to obtain 3.0 pointer and above. Moving on to the next variable, which is the sleep hours of the students. This one, we are going to interpret the descriptive statistic also. The mean value for this variable is 6.571, which means that on the average, students sleep around for 6.571 hours every day. As for the median value, we can interpret that 50% of students tend to sleep more than 6 hours or sleep less than 6 hours. Meanwhile, for the mode, most of the students likely to sleep for 6.0 hours. Besides, the standard deviation for this variable is 1.1450, while the variance is 1.311. Now, for the correlation and regression analysis, based on the respective values on the table that you can see on the screen, the regression line equation that we found is 3.354 plus 0.004x. Now, as you can see on the scatter plot diagram, we can conclude that the data has a positive linear relationship between the sleep hours and GPA of the students. Moreover, the diagram also shows that these two variables have a very low positive correlation. That's all for my part. Thank you.
For the conclusion, based on the data that we have interpreted, the increase in hour of sleep of students will increase their GPA. The average GPA is 3.50 and the average sleep duration is 6.571 hours. Next, maximum GPA is 4.00. Meanwhile, maximum sleep duration is 9 hours. The dispersion of the GPA data is skewed to the left. Meanwhile, sleep data is approximately symmetry. Lastly, regression analysis show only 1.2% of GPA variation is explained by the hours of sleep and 98.8% is attributed to other factors.